Business Focus with Kudzi Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.
Good morning and welcome to Business Focus, right here on Capi Talk 100.4 FM Harare Heartbeat. You have questions to do with business, feel free to drop them up on our WhatsApp platform 0719 100404, and Kudzi Sharara will help us in answering those questions. Bring them up on 0719 100404. We're waiting out for those questions to come through. Thank you so much for all the questions that are coming through. All right. All right. Just before we get to talk to Kudzi, there's a response that's coming up from someone, Sydney Murato, in Canada, Toronto. Says, just a reminder, guys, a stag is a slang word for speculator. A question asked yesterday, Nevaya vakabvunzwa ni mwana is a homework. It means someone who wants to profit from short-term market movements by quickly moving in and out of the position. Thank you so much to you, Sydney Murato from Toronto, Canada, for that one. Let's go to Kudzi. Good morning, Kudzi. How are you today?
Good morning, Tinashe. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you so much. So, Kudzi, yesterday you spoke about CBZ, but you spoke about how CBZ is performing as a bank. But now my question is, who is getting the most credit or loans from local banks and why?
Thank you, Tinashe, for that question. And before I give you the sector that is getting the most banks, maybe I can start with other sectors that are getting a significant amount of the loans that are given by banks. So at number 2, you've got your manufacturing sector, which is getting about 15.68% of the loans that are given by banks. So that's the manufacturing sector, 15.68%, which for me, you could say it's good, given that the manufacturing sector is one sector that we would want to do even better as a country. We import quite a lot of manufactured products into the country. And if we have got a working manufacturing sector, a manufacturing sector that has got access to loans for expansion, for working capital, then you have a healthy sector. So I'm not sure if this 15.68% is really good. And then second from that, you've got your agriculture sector, which is getting about 15.54%. So this is another productive sector that is getting a significant amount of the loans that are extended by banks. We know the agriculture sector, Zimbabwe's economy is, it depends largely on the agriculture sector. You look at even our export earnings, when you look at tobacco, we earn quite a significant amount from tobacco. Recently, we are now wheat self-sufficient. We are growing enough wheat as a country. And again, it depends with how much money are we putting into that sector. And I would say maybe, if you look at this, you would say maybe banks have come to the party and are doing their fair share of contributing to the agriculture sector. But I think more could be done. I understand there is a really need for infrastructure with regards irrigation, where you'd want more money to go into that sector. So probably you could also maybe ask for more in that sector. And then third, fourth is, remember we've got number 1. So fourth is the distribution sector, which is getting about 12.73%. The distribution sector is more like your Marana in a way, because like for example, in our big retail chains, most of the products that they have are distributed by this particular sector. Some of them, they go actually out of the country, bring in products that they then distribute to wholesalers or to manufacturers. So that's the distribution sector. I think it might also include, transport and logistics is actually on its own. That's the distribution sector. But most banks are lending their money to households. So households, you could actually call it maybe individual loans. You could also maybe call it personal loans. This is where most banks are extending their money, and it is at 28.28%. That's where the bulk of the loans are going. Now, one question that people always ask when they look at that figure, they're like, okay, so it shows on the face of it, you could say, well, Zimbabwe are so consumptive. When you say Zimbabweans are consumptive, you're saying they're borrowing money for consumption. But when you then go deeper into this number, you might actually find out that people are borrowing so that they can invest in their small businesses. I want to start my business. I'm employed. I go and get a salary-based loan where my salary is used as collateral. But the money, I'm actually using it for the productive sector. Maybe Rotandaka project, Kanguke Huku. Maybe I want to actually build a house. So, if you look at all the face of it, you could say, wow, banks shouldn't be lending that much money to the consumptive sector, the productive sector. But knowing Zimbabweans, they are enterprising, knowing that the bulk of Zimbabweans are self-employed, you would want to think that people are borrowing so that they can actually start their own businesses. Maybe it's a question that we can pose out there actually to say, why do you borrow? Why do you borrow? Some borrow for home improvements, so that's not consumptive maybe. If you're going to be doing your repairs at your house. Some borrow for major purchases. Maybe this is consumptive when you talk about cars, appliances, and other big-ticket items. Maybe this is consumptive. Some borrow for medical expenses. An unexpected medical bill or procedure comes through and you don't have the money, you just have to go and borrow. Travel, some borrow for travel, funding their vacation or trip. Some people, so this one is consumptive, you borrow for that one. Some borrow for education. I see every time when schools are about to open, you get financial institutions asking people to come and borrow for school fees and stuff like that. So that is, again, education is also up there in terms of why people borrow. Maybe you've got responses on why people borrow. Maybe I can also talk about how expensive are loans in Zimbabwe. How expensive are loans in Zimbabwe? So when you look at the lending rate for individuals, they are paying, as of October, individuals were paying a minimum of 38.49%, up to a maximum of 45.17%. Now that's huge. You're talking about almost giving 40% of the funds that you borrowed. You pay 40% extra when you're paying back the money. And I think, I'm not sure what kind of business you will be doing that will give you this kind of a return. And I'm talking about ZIG loans, the local currency loans. That's the minimum in October was 8.49%, the maximum 45.17%. And then, so those are the lending rates. But someone will say, okay, so if banks are lending my money at this rate, what am I getting if I'm depositing my money into the bank? So for individuals, if you go and deposit your money, you get about 5.41%. So you can see the gap there, the net interest margin. And then maximum 7.19%. So you give your bank money as a deposit, they give you 7% as interest. But when you go and borrow, they ask you to pay 45.17%. I know it's associated with risk premiums and things like that, but I think that gap is huge. And then in US dollars, because people are now borrowing in US dollars since they are also earning in US dollars, the minimum interest rate that you can pay is about 12.98%, and then the maximum is at 17.8%. And those are in US dollars, which again I think is very expensive. As a country, yes, I know we are getting loans even from outside Zimbabwe that are coming into Zimbabwe. Our banks are getting such loans at probably 11%. That's the rate that they are lending in, and then they put on their own markup and fees and charges. And the minimum is 12.98%, and then the maximum is 17.8%. Again, is really huge for individual loans. So I'm not sure why do you borrow, Tinashe, when have you ever borrowed anyway, anytime or in the last year or so? Did you borrow any money from the bank?
I think it's been a couple of years now since I last did, but I remember I borrowed my school fees kunyanya.
All right. Yeah, that's I don't know if you are getting any responses.
Yeah,
in terms
there
of
is,
why do people borrow.
Elder Samanyanga vari kubhange vari kuti, I have been borrowing every 3 years from the bank since 2010. I bought a stand and started building using these borrowed funds.
Yeah, that's an interesting one as well, Tinache, because, sometimes for some people it's very difficult to save. Like you put $500 aside or $1,000 aside, and you say, okay, I want to save for my house, to build my house. And then before you know it, you're withdrawing $100. No, those are so Sarah. And then before you know it, it's that $1,000 is now $200, or there's nothing anymore. So some people, they go and borrow, do their construction, and they repay the bank. It's easier to use a lump sum amount, and then you go and pay. But however, it means that the cost of your house is now expensive because you were not using your own savings. You're actually using expensive money. Like in this case, if you are to borrow US dollars, maybe you're paying 17% as interest. You then put in those fees and charges, and the amount goes above 20%. But you have to know yourself and your financial goals and your objectives and things like that.
Kudzi.
Yes, but
varipo here vanombotora mari shoma dzinenge ma2000 1000 vanonyatso ndakaita profit nayo, because I just believe kuti mari dzini ndedzekunyura. Handisati ndamboita kana musoro nayo mari yandotora chikwereti kubhengi chii.
Yeah, you know how it is with Zimbabwe Pakistan. Remember, for example, let's talk about vanonzi tender preneurs where you go to, like we have seen it even in government, where you go and say, okay, I've won a tender in government, I'm going to supply them with laptops at 9,000, and you know very well that these laptops you can actually get them for $500. So you go and borrow from the bank, you purchase the laptops, you deliver, you get paid $9,000 for a $500 laptop, and so you've got no fear of borrowing even at that 17%, 18%, because you know the profit that you're going to make. So there are people who are striking deals, with not only in government, but even in the private sector, where people, you go and the buyer will tell you now, okay, this is your price, but maybe put it at double so that I can also get my cut. So once you get that tender, people go and borrow so that they can meet the obligations, and then they make their money. And in Zimbabwe again, you find that you need 100 rand South Africa. You go and buy something 100 rand, and then you bring it here in Zimbabwe. You want to sell it for $100 US. We have seen that. But I remember people will just go and buy something for 100 rand and then come here and sell it for $100. So you can actually borrow because the returns are huge.
Yeah, but kumatenda preneur mawana kuwamatanga akasunga zvinhu.
Yeah, ikoko kwakasungwa mazwano vari kushamba because he is not paying.
Asikubhadhara kuwamatanga.
Yeah, if he believes that your invoices are inflated, he doesn't pay. Well, the last time we had a conversation with him, that's what he was saying. That they are now don't just get it. So this is how it works in government. So, for example, a ministry, for example, you get a job from a ministry, and it's Pakistani, and the ministry will then send the invoice to treasury and say, okay, we got services from Pakistani and we need to pay him, and this is what Pakistani charged us. Now, what the Ministry of Finance will do in what they call value for money, they then say, okay, Pakistani provided this particular service, and charged so much. How are other people charging the same for the same service? How much are they charging? And if they see that Pakistani is charging like 10 times more, they would ask questions to say, why is he charging 10 times more? This product is charged like 10 times less elsewhere. So why should we pay him this much? And then, these are the issues.
But panorwadza kudzi, why allow me to build something first anditi? Ndavaka ndokupa mari yangu yandokuda, and then moti yakawandisa indavaka.
Yeah, those are. So you see, the thing is, Kuti, the person who has contracted you, and my interest, made matorana and stuff, but I'm not going to guys.
So I think from Pekutanga chaipo ngatange tadila na George tisatapinda madiri.
but maybe that could be
PIMSEC
a way.
finance.
But their guidelines actually, Pakistan, their guidelines. I remember I had a conversation. Remember there was a time when the Ministry of Transport, I think, when they were not paying certain contractors, and they were saying that Treasury had not paid them. And after we had a conversation with Treasury, they were saying, no, we asked them to say, okay, guys, for this particular project, this is the maximum you can contract, right? And then probably the ministry will go and contract for more than what has been agreed for. Then you have got issues when it comes to that, yeah.
All right, Kudzi, you spoke about nyaya yekukwereta kumabhenki kuti zvikwereti zvakanyawanda zviri kutotorwa household loans. What does this mean to the economy at large?
Yeah, it comes back to the issue that we were talking about, to say, what are people using this money for? If it's just for consumption of trinkets, trinkets, China, and you just go and borrow and you buy those things, the money is just going out of them. Some of them, they don't even bank. Some of these businesses that we have now, your boutiques, your tuck shops, the money you just consume, the money goes via to Messina or any other country where these products are coming from without much benefit from for the economy. You don't contribute in terms of tax. So if it's for consumption, then there's a challenge. But if I'm getting a loan as an individual, and I come and then establish a small poultry project, for me, it's income generating. And yes, it's not a lot of money, but it's income generating. I can actually pay a loan through the production that I'm doing. So that should be fine. But you would want, like I was saying, that you would want your manufacturing sector to access more credit. You would want your mining sector to be able to access the credit. You would want your any productive sector in the economy to access credit at even cheaper interest rates. I think that would be good for the economy if we can do it that way. But if it's just for consumption, like these individuals are just consuming this money for food and other consumptive activities, then it might not be good for the economy. Also, however, it also depends on where they are spending this money. If I'm going to be spending to companies that are actually producing here in Zimbabwe, if I'm spending the money as a tourist, for example, then there's that benefit that will come.
Okay.
But it makes sense, yeah.
There's another question that's coming up was saying that looking at marketing conditions in lending, are there emerging trends or innovations in business lending?
Yeah, maybe it's an area that I haven't really looked to say what exactly is happening. But there's a trend that I've noticed, though, at Nature, where, for example, you go to your financial institutions. Most financial institutions, they are not like your big banks. They have now established microfinance houses. You know, with microfinance, the loans are actually way, way more than what we were talking about. And probably the loan is like 20% per month. But we're talking about 20% for the per annum, but it would be like 20% per month. So I've heard that most of these institutions that have got these financial institutions that have since established microfinance houses, they're actually encouraging more of these individual clients to say, no, if you want a loan, this particular loan, go to our microfinance house. That's where you can get the loan. So that is a trend where they're pushing people to these expensive loans. That's where they are lending. They are lending via those microfinance. I think it makes the loans expensive. It might lead to what you call it, debt distress for individuals.
Okay. All right, Kudzi, just about 3 minutes before we wrap it up for today, let's look at the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange trading update for yesterday.
Yeah, so the ZSE continues to weaken. The all-share index was down by 1.17%. Top 10 index losing 1.08%. And this was on the back of losses in BAT, down a massive 15%. Econet also easing by 1.75%. And on Econet, I saw a report in the papers, I think yesterday, last night, where it seems like the telecoms operators across Africa, they are now calling that for new rules and regulations in terms of how Starlink operates. They believe that it is a threat to the investments that they've made over the years, putting up base stations, digging trenches for broadband and things like that, creating employment. And they believe the way Starlink operates is a threat to all that investment and the jobs that they created. So it will be interesting to see, and they want Starlink to maybe to contribute more to the economy, maybe in form of taxes. It could be maybe I don't know what exactly they would want, but that's a story that I read online. I think Business Weekly is also carrying a similar story. So maybe look at it online and just see whether these guys, what they are saying is justifiable, or they are just crying because they are losing a bigger share of their check. Delta also coming off by 1.5%. Probably investors not happy with the latest results, but I'm happy. They are paying a dividend out of those results. Tanganda also coming off by 0.27%. And then on the upside, South Africa top riser with a 6.88% gain. ProPlastics putting on 4.76%. And then CBZ, Unifreight, and Zerechel gaining by marginal 0.0 something. All three of them a marginal 0.0.6, another one 0.02, another one 0.01. So not much movement there for those three. And then lastly, most of the money went into CBZ, 1.4 million big, Delta 1.3 million big.
All right, Takudzi, thank you so much for Business Focus for Tuesday. We discuss more tomorrow, Wednesday. Thank you so much for today. Good day to you.
Thank you.
Business Focus with Kudzi Sharara on the Champions League Breakfast.